Hi, everyone. Gene here. Just a quick note before we jump into today's show. Last week, in episode 296, we had a great conversation about calling. This week, we're talking about how you can put into place goals and try and create things in your life that you want. So this is a perfect complement to what we talked about last week. So if you're looking at for some insight on how to get clarity, check out last week's episode 296. When you're looking to take some action, this is the place you want to be. Enjoy today's show.
We often have to evolve and become the kind of person that has the job or the house that we're looking for.
This is Monterastelli. Welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live today from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 297, originally aired December 13th, 2017. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Today, we have a conversation about taking action and how you can use tapping to specifically create the things that you want in your life. Before we jump into that, just as a reminder, we have created a 10-part guide to help you to eliminate self-sabotage, very much along the line of what we're talking about today. There's tapping scripts, there's instructional videos, there's tap-along audios. There's all sorts of great tools. All you need to do is go to tappingqa.com, click on the big blue button, and we will start sending you that guide one little piece at a time, tappingqa.com. If you happen to be listening to today's show in the website, all you need to do is just go up in the right-hand column. You'll see a blue button there. Click on that, and we will start providing the guide for you. So today's conversation is with my friend Kris Ferraro, and she lays out a really simple, specific process that you can use to move from an idea to actually having something in your life. And if you know me and you've been listening to my stuff for any amount of time, you know how much I love a very specific, straightforward, step-by-step process, and this provides exactly that. In the interview, Kris mentions a couple of other resources. You can find those resources, the worksheet, the other podcast, by simply going to tappingqapodcast.com, clicking on the link for episode 297. If you happen to be listening to this in a smartphone or a smart device, if you go into the show notes, you will find the links there. So here is my conversation with Kris on how you can start creating the things you want in your life. As we were emailing back and forth when we were getting ready for today's conversation, you mentioned that you had a really simple process for using lists and creating the stuff in our lives that we want to have. And how did you initially come about creating this simple process?
Well, list making is something that I've used my whole life. It's been a focusing tool for me. So even as a child, it's pretty much the only way I can get anything done. It was only years later when I actually was a hypnotherapy student that I started thinking about creating what I want in my life in a really conscious way. And that doing that, the clearer that I became, the clearer my manifestations were. And so using lists became a way of coming into clarity.
So then what does the process look like? Kind of walk us through it, kind of step by step, how we can do it. And I'll just kind of poke and ask you questions along the way.
Okay, that sounds great. So the first thing is that this is something that's best used for something that's very physical and tangible. So to set yourself up for success, this works really well with jobs, promotions, vehicles, places to live. So very physical things. This isn't a very esoteric type of tool. So think of something that you want to create in your life. And what you're going to do is you're going to create a list that has a process to it. And I've created a PDF so that you can see what that looks like. And before you even put it into the format that I've created, you want to start looking at the qualities that you are looking for in that thing. So let's say jobs, because job is a very easy thing to think about. How much money do you want to make? What kind of tasks do you want to do? Do you want to work from home? Do you want to work in an office? Do you want to work independently? Do you want to work with a team? And in doing that, think about all of the different possibilities for yourself. Now, what happens normally when people start doing this is instead of putting what they really, really, really want, they put what they're willing to settle for. And that doesn't work very well with this. So you want to kind of let yourself dream big. And we're going to work on any doubts that you have later on. That's going to be the tapping portion of this. So you want to start thinking of all those different qualities, travel distance. Do you want to travel for work? How much time off do you want to have? What kind of person do you want to work for and with? What kind of qualities do you want to have in them? And a really good way of finding out what you want is already knowing what you don't want. So that's also always very easy. If you're looking for a job, it's probably because your current job is not entirely very satisfying. So you could start with what are the things that you dislike about what you're doing right now, and then what would the positive opposites of those be? So if you have a supervisor who's a micromanager, then you want someone who is going to trust you and allow you to work independently and do what you know how to do best.
And so what I like about what you've shared there's kind of two components that I think are really useful. The first is being super specific about what we want. I think that's a huge mistake people make, because it's really hard to aim something that isn't named very clearly. And the second is I personally love using the process of naming what we don't want to find what we do want. Because not only does it help us to be more specific, but it helps us to uncover things that we never would have thought of that are important to us. I was working with a client to find a new job, and we asked that exact question. And two things that she complained about in her current job was there was no windows, and that she was interior on a building, and she was working by herself and wasn't in a collaborative environment. And if she just would have been doing a traditional job search on benefit and role and salary, she would have missed those things. And so going through the process as you laid it out opened her eyes to what was actually important beyond the obvious. So I really love that step.
Well, it's so easy, right, to focus on what we don't want. That's what our left brain does. It focuses on problems and on things that aren't working. And so we need to use that to our advantage. And so once you start pulling together this list of qualities, you're going to put them into a format. And you're going to create an actual sheet. So you're going to start with an affirmation, anything that connects you to the higher power of your understanding. So whatever terminology you use for that. And if you don't use anything, higher self is perfectly acceptable. Okay. And you should work within your belief system. What helps you connect to something that's bigger than yourself, something that's greater than the individual that you are, and something that helps you feel a sense of trust. And then you're going to title it with my whatever it is, my new job, my new car, my new house. And because you're claiming that as already belonging to you. And then you're going to take those qualities that you've brought together and you're going to list them in order from most important to least important. And in that alone is very beneficial in helping you to get clear. Because when you have to start putting an order on it, it's like, well, how important is this to me really? Well, this is really, really important, so I'm going to put that at the top. This other thing would be nice to have, but maybe not such a big deal. And then you're going to express this or something better. And I want to just talk for a moment about that because this is an essential part of the process. Anytime we're talking about manifestation, people can tend to become very rigid and very controlling, which in and of itself can shut down the creative process. Okay. And so this or something better is leaving in a sense of openness that there may be something here that you left out. There may be something that you forgot. And so I can just share a story recently because I've used this process many times. And recently I sold my house and was going to go back to being a tenant because I'm traveling quite a bit. And I just couldn't take care of my house the way that I had previously. And so the decision was made. I was very, very clear about it. And I just kind of assumed everything was going to sort of fall into place and I'd find the right living space. I wasn't too concerned about it until I got closer to when I needed to be out of the house. And the people around me started getting very nervous. Are you looking? Have you found something? What's happening? So I went back to this process, and it was really interesting for me because I had decided that I wanted an apartment that was part of a house because I wanted a lot of windows, and a lot of apartments that I had seen in buildings were dark and they just didn't have enough natural light. And I had made a decision about a few different things that I really, really, really wanted. And within 10 days, I found exactly what I was looking for. And it was different and so much better than what I had put down. And I had heard about an apartment in a building from a friend who lived in the building. And I thought, I don't know, it's not really what I was looking for, but I'll just be open and I'll go check it out. And it's a small apartment building. So literally there's windows in every single room. There's natural light all over. And once I saw it, I could see that it was exactly what I was looking for. There were things that were even better. Like I have a view of the New York City skyline from both my home office and my living room. That was not on my list. I have a storage unit in the basement. Like that was something that I hadn't been a tenant for a long time. I'd forgotten about that. I hadn't put it on there. And so I got all of what I needed and so much more. I have 4 people that live in this very small building, and a couple that I just met briefly brought me soup the first week that I was here. All of these things that I couldn't even have imagined have worked out. The one thing I didn't get is I didn't quite get the bathtub that I wanted. I do have a bathtub, just not the one I wanted. But everything else was so much better than I could have anticipated, even though it didn't look exactly like I thought it was going to. And so I want to just encourage people that when they're doing this to just be open and to let this process show them that they might have an ability to have more than they anticipated.
And one of the things that I find is when we're taking action, one of the biggest resistance we have is we don't want to take an action that's taking us in the wrong direction. And so we don't take any action at all because there's this subconscious thing that's keeping us from heading the wrong way and having to backtrack. And oftentimes, just going through that first step that you've laid out there, where we're getting really clear about what we want, a significant amount of resistance melts away even before we start tapping, because there's so much more clarity about what we want. We're naturally really good at solving problems. We're really good at finding what we need. And when we don't take the time to get clear about that, it's hard to take action. And all of a sudden, when you know what you want, action becomes much easier because you're dismissing the things and not wasting time and effort on those things that aren't going to get you what you want.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And in fact, I think of this list exercise as the beginning of taking action. Mm-hmm. You know, that it starts with something like this, because as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, well, there's no point in me looking here. There's no point in me looking over there. This is really, really what I want. And it was really interesting because what happened was there were people around me that were very supportive in that. And there were people that were saying, you're not going to be able to find that. You're not going to be able to have that. And so all that did was, of course, any type of resistance that comes from outside of me just makes me really apply myself even more to kind of prove them wrong. So it's really a fascinating process because you can see things that you hadn't really anticipated. And I really love that about it. And then you're going to express gratitude in advance for the completion of this manifestation. And then you're going to use a closer. So you could put it as done. And so it is. Amen. Anything that works for you. And then once you create the initial list, it doesn't just become this static thing. What happens is as you start taking action, so for myself, as I started going out and looking at apartment complexes and houses and driving around and looking at signs and looking online for places, I started discovering things I definitely did not want and things that I definitely did. And that was more evidence that I could bring back and add to my list. So the list becomes like a living thing. So I'll give you an example. I looked at an apartment complex and the landlord said that they don't rent to people who are self-employed, which was something I had not anticipated as being an issue. And so I thought, oh, okay. So I went back to my list and I put my new apartment has a landlord who's completely comfortable with self-employed tenants. And of course, everyone in this entire building is. So that's exactly what I got. When the landlord originally showed me this building, he said, if you want it, it's yours. He never asked me what I did. He never asked me for my tax returns or anything like that. So when you see things as you're looking, or as you're searching, or as you're looking online, or as you go on that job interview that you don't like, you want to include the positive opposites on the list. And the same goes for the things that you do like. So maybe you interview for a job that is not of an interest to you in many ways, but there was one aspect, like maybe they do tuition reimbursement and you're thinking about going back to school. That's something that you want to come back and add that onto your list. So the list continues to grow and morph and change. And of course, each time you do that, you're reordering the list of importance. So you're constantly growing in clarity. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense because it's foolish for us to believe that we know exactly what we want when we have incomplete information.
Right.
And by giving yourself permission to know that my vision can change, there's been lots of times in my life where I thought there was something that I was supposed to be doing next. And as I investigated that and went through a process like this to put that into place, the simple investigation process put me into a position to see an option that I didn't know was possible because my experience was so incomplete. And it was much more about asking the question about the first thing than doing the first thing that led me to the second thing, which was the exact right place for me to be. And so giving ourselves permission to let a process like this unfold is the best thing that we can do because our information is incomplete no matter how much information we have. And just creating a process that is fluid like this just allows us to be open to really amazing things. Again, getting back to this or something better, the something better is presenting itself even before we get there. And by recognizing that's a possibility, it gives us permission to pursue that.
Right. And then it becomes fun. Because there's not this enormous pressure that you're either putting on yourself or your prospective job or your prospective landlord. Is this right for me? And if it's not right, it's just not right. It takes the pressure off of, I have to make this work. I have to make this fit. I have to make myself fit. The worst thing to do is to go to a job interview being desperate for that job. You're literally going to repel that position away from you. If it's the right fit for you, even so, you would still have that energy of repelling it. And so when you're instead focusing on, I am creating this for myself, I am taking responsibility, I am trusting in the higher power that there's something here for me, then it becomes, well, what do I like? What do I don't like? How does this fit with my life? How does it not fit? And then it takes so much pressure off of trying to force something to happen that may not really be for your highest good.
So then what's the next step in the process? As we're stepping out there, as we're evolving, as our list is transforming, it's growing, we're changing priorities, what do we do next?
So you want to print this out. I know not everybody has a printer nowadays, but if you can have access to one, it would be great. And I want you to keep it on your nightside table next to your bed and read the list out loud every night before you go to sleep and first thing in the morning when you wake up in the morning. Okay. And you're going to read the entire thing, including the affirmations. And the list is going to be in the form of, my new apartment has 2 bedrooms. My new apartment has really high ceilings. You're going to read the sentences in that format and do the entire thing. So now we go to the portion of, how does tapping have anything to do with this? Well, we often have to evolve and become the kind of person that has the the job or the house that we're looking for. And so there may be things in the way. And in fact, there often is. For example, if you have a lot of job disappointment, looking for jobs is not going to be very fun for you because you have this whole history behind you. And when you have unresolved disappointment, it will definitely sabotage you from putting yourself out there for fear of experiencing that disappointment again. Okay? So there's a number of ways that you can take these statements and make them much more believable and workable for you, and use them in a way that's really going to advance your healing. You know, I look at goals from two different perspectives. There's the I want this thing, whatever it is, and I'm going to do what it takes to have that. Then there's I want this thing, and I want to become the person that's able to have that thing. And I want whatever's in the way to show up in my life so I can clean it up and get to that with a lot less effort and struggle and self-blame. And so the goal actually ends up becoming a part of your greater healing process. And so there's a number of different ways you can work with these statements, these qualities that you have listed. And a lot of it's going to depend on what kind of a learner and what kind of a tapper you are. So because I came from a hypnotherapy background, because I'm an artist, I'm very visual. And when I first started tapping 15 years ago, I was a very visual tapper. So I used a lot of pictures. I used some aspects from hypnotherapy like the gauge technique, which I'll get into. And now I'm very much kinesthetic. So now when I tap, how does this statement make me feel? What's going on in my body? What's going on in my energy field? When I say that statement, do I feel like I'm in alignment with that? Or does it feel like I just got kicked in the stomach when I say it? And I resolve things from that way. So I want to talk about a few different ways that people can work with the statements. So the first thing is if you are a visual person, then you can use the statements in a way of, well, when you say that statement of my new job pays me $100,000 a year, what kind of pictures come up in your mind? And it could be something that's very symbolic, like a stormy sea. Well, that doesn't feel very positive. Or it could be something that looks like being chained to a desk. Oh, so there may be a belief there that if I make $100,000, I'm going to kind of be owned by that company. So you're looking for visual clues. And you can just use simple like EFT 101 to work with those images, to tap on what you see in the images and see and follow how the images change. The gauge technique, which I just mentioned, is a great technique to use for a variety of things. Some people look at something that looks like a gauge that goes from 0 to 100. I look at something that's more like a thermometer that goes from 0 to 100. So if you say, my new job pays me $100,000 a year, where does the gauge go? Is it 50% of you that believes it? 75, 10%? Okay. When you look at that gauge, you can literally just tap with the image that you see on the gauge and see if the gauge goes down or goes up. Of course, with a positive statement, you want the percentage to go up. With a negative statement, you want it to go down. So how believable is that for you? You could literally go through the list and give percentages on all of the different statements, because there's going to be ones that are very believable for you, especially if you have experience with that. So if you make $90,000 a year now, $100,000 isn't going to seem too out of the realm for you. If you're making $20,000, $100,000 is going to be a little different for you. So work with the statements that are the least believable first. You want to bite off the ones that are most unreasonable for you, because you want to make them more reasonable. So that's a way to do it if you're visual. If you're kinesthetic, you can do what I shared, which is my process. Say the statement. What is the feeling nature in your body? You know, throat, chest, and stomach are the three main areas, but we can feel that discord anywhere within us. And It's one of the practices that I give every single client that I have to start getting into a practice of when they're feeling something, a painful emotion, something that's uncomfortable, to close their eyes and to drop out of the story about what that emotion is and down into the sensations of where they're holding that in their bodies. I am as guilty as anyone else of sometimes living a very neck up experience. I'm a big thinker all the time. And yet there's a whole world that's happening below the neck that's really important to tune into. And just getting into a practice of feeling those feelings without the story actually allows them to move with or without tapping. So that's a good practice for anyone to work with, even if that's not natural for you.
So there's two things that I want to highlight just for the listeners inside of what you just said there. The first was you talking about this idea of, when we're tapping on the resistance that's coming up and kind of the double benefit that comes there. I think that that's a really important thing for us to recognize, that when there is a piece of resistance in front of us, there is some underlying belief or trauma or something that is holding that resistance in place. And when we do a process like this, it's giving us the opportunity to get relief in the moment so we can seek that thing that we want. And we're getting the added benefit of undermining that limiting belief or trauma that has created that resistance. Now, it's not the exact same thing as tapping directly on the trauma or the limiting belief, but what we're doing is we're giving ourselves the space to have that resistance to show up less the next time. So there's a double benefit. And I love when we use something specific like this to get at something that is bigger. The other piece that I think is really important is the piece that you ended with there about this kind of head, neck up existence. We are notoriously bad eyewitnesses to our own experience. And there's been many times in my life where I could intellectually tell you the way that I am. And if I only tapped on my explanation as to why I am, I would be wasting a huge amount of time because I'm wrong about the way that I am. And when we do and I think you phrased it exactly perfectly, when we settle into our body and we let go of the story, we're giving our subconscious mind the opportunity to bring the true information forward because we've let go of the story that we tell. And so I think that is just an excellent thing for us to remember when we're tapping, and you hit it just perfectly.
Well, how often do we feel anger, right? The story might elicit a huge emotion of anger within us. I was betrayed, he did this, they said that. And when you get out of the story, there is the hurt, right? Yeah. And that's really what we need to work with. The anger is part of the protective defense mechanism, the righteous indignation. And it's what's underneath that we need to get to. And when we can detach from the story and simply focus on what is happening, it pulls us fully into the present moment. And listen, energy needs two things. It needs to move and it needs space to move.
Right.
So when we are focused on that discomfort, that area within us that feels like we're twisted up in knots, our loving, compassionate focus increases the space and allows movement to happen. And so it's often what I recommend for anybody who feels stuck. Anyone who's stuck in a reoccurring cycle of, this is always happening to me, I can't believe I'm here again, I tell them, move into the body. Because within just being a compassionate witness to our energetic experience, those aspects begin to resolve, and we're not so attached about where they came from or what they're about. We're simply viewing it from an energetic perspective.
That's awesome. So we've created some focus. We've created some clarity. We're tuning into the list regularly. We're updating the list. Now we spend a little time tapping on it. How does it unfold after that?
Well, where this can lead to greater healing is really what I call the mental aspect of this. And so when we are looking at something that's not believable, so I'll just use the $100,000 example. we can turn this into a really profound source of healing for ourselves by just adding the word because. So I don't believe I can make $100,000 because. And this is something that I've taken from Linda Wood's duality process. And Jean, I know that you interviewed her about this. I encourage all of your listeners to listen to that interview. It's an amazing process that's great for fleshing out the things that are in the way of what we're trying to achieve. And so just saying because what's going to come up are the surface things that you're already thinking about. I don't have a college education, or I've never made that amount of money before. The things that you've been already giving yourself as evidence of why you can't have that. But you want to keep tapping until something comes up that surprises you. So I can't make $100,000 because I'm worthless. Whoa. Where did that come from? Okay. And so you've now opened a door into something that's not just going to create a shift for you in whatever you're looking to manifest, but can create a shift for how you perceive yourself in your entire life. Okay. And so just adding that word in and just allowing yourself to just express out loud, just to say whatever comes up until you get those things that surprise you. And then when they come up and surprise you, where are you feeling that in your body? Tap until you resolve it. This is where memories come up. This is where traumas come up. And so you can start keeping an inventory of those things that come up and resolve them yourselves, or be safe and take them to a practitioner and work on them with someone. Because if you're really feeling worthless, that's not just affecting your job, that's affecting every area of your life. And you want to turn that around. And this is a way where this very seemingly simple exercise becomes an entryway into far deeper healing.
This is one of the reasons why I love working with clients where we're working towards a very specific goal. We're not just tapping on past trauma for the sake of past trauma, and we're not just tapping on limiting beliefs because they exist. By looking specifically at an action that we want to take, what we're able to do is we're able to highlight the specific things that are showing up in our life that are in the way of us moving forward. So doing a process like this doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to tap on the biggest issue we have, but we're tapping on the issue that is the biggest obstacle to having what we want. And so by having a specific goal, we're giving ourselves the opportunity to just do a little triage and figure out what's the most important thing for us to be tapping on. And by doing that, we're going to get exactly like you said, this rippling effect through our lives, not just with what's in front of us and this particular goal, but it's probably the thing that is showing up in a lot of places. And we get to see transformation all over the place by working on a singular issue.
Absolutely. Well, when you think about it, where does the desire come from? Where does the desire for that better job, that better place, where is it really coming from? I have come to learn in my own life that it's coming from the greater part of who I am that is seeking to be expressed in the world in a bigger way. And in that, it is inviting forward what's in the way, the debris that's in the road, so to speak, And so we get to work on that. And then the focus isn't so much on, I have to have this thing. It's, I am becoming the person that I really was meant to be and who I am without all of this stuff that's been on me. And when the focus becomes that, the things start showing up so much more easily because we're less attached to it. So the manifestation almost becomes like a natural outpicturing of the work that we're doing on our journey. And so then when it comes, it's like, oh yeah, not only is this fantastic, but it feels natural because I have evolved into that person that has this and has this level of trust in myself and in my own healing.
Yeah, exactly. So is there any other pieces that we haven't covered in the process, or is it just this recursive process that we keep going through, we keep pulling things up, we keep transforming what we want and tapping on it, which all of a sudden leads us to place of choices?
Well, if you can get to a place where you've cleared a lot of those statements so they feel very much believable, you can certainly use the tapping as the bridge to the subconscious to tap them in while you're saying them.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to do maybe first thing in the morning. I don't recommend it to people before they go to sleep because tapping is activating.
Right.
And we're calming down. But you could do hold and breathe. You could just touch the points. You could put your hands on your heart, do something that connects you to your body while you're reading them at night. And then in the morning, it's a great way to kick up your morning in a way that's going to set you up for success. One of the things that I do when I tap on these types of things in the morning is I just stay on the collarbone point because that's K27. It's our furnace. So it's like I'm lighting my furnace or my pilot light in the morning to get me going in the morning. So I'm doing two things at once. I'm doing something for my physical self while I'm bridging to the subconscious and affirming that I'm already having these qualities in what I'm looking to have in my life.
Awesome. Well, Kris, you know me and you know how much I love a process. I think this is just simple and elegant. And thanks for sharing with us today. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me back.
That is such a super great, straightforward process. I love it so much. If you would like to get the worksheet that we talked about inside of that you can download, or to find out more information about Kris and her amazing work, all you need to do is go to tappingqandapodcast.com, click on the link for episode 297. And like I said, you could see how this is a perfect complement for the conversation that we had last week in episode 296 about calling. Getting clear about what we want last week, this week, starting to get more clarity as we take action. If you know someone in your life who could use something like this, please be our ambassador. Pass it along. Don't spam their inbox. Just let them know. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can find the podcast in Apple Podcasts, in Google Music Play, in Stitcher, in TuneIn. We're now over in Spotify. Wherever you listen to the show, please leave us a rating and a review. It makes it easier for other people to find the show. And if you have any questions at all about tapping or something you'd like to see us cover in the future, someone we should interview, please, please, please reach out to me. My email address is Gene, Gene, at tappingqanda.com. Or if you're in the website, click on the contact link. If you've downloaded the amazing Tapping Q&A app, which is available both on Android and Apple devices, if you click the contact link inside of the app, you can leave me a voice message or you can shoot me a text message from right inside of there. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Monterastelli. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Monterastelli, Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Monterastelli or Tapping Q&A.